Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and we will begin with this session right now. During the following 2 hours, we will explain the HCH project in EU. This was a tender, and the first speaker will be Boudewijn Fokke. He was the leader of this project, and he was the former project manager from TAU, and he is an environmental consultant right now, and he will explain the general guidelines of this project.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to present here the results of the project we finished more or less a year ago. My name is Boudewijn Fokke, and I was working for TAU for quite some time. And since a year, I'm working as an independent consultant, still for TAU because I'm pensioned. My presentation will be on the HCA project. Then I will go into the history of the project, of the production of the use and the lindane. And there is some overlap already with earlier presentations, but I think it's still worthwhile to discuss. But besides the production, the history, I want to also present you the history of awareness. Then I'll go into a bit more detail on the life cycle of the HCA and lindane, and then briefly the project results. My colleagues will go into a bit more detail, and then I come with some conclusive remarks. Project history. In end of 2019, we got the order from the European Commission, and we, together with Sarga, CDM Smith, and TAU, and many others subcontracted, we carried out this 2-year-long project. Task 1 was to obtain an overview of all potential HCA impacted sites in Europe. And task 2 was to assist 6 sites impacted by HCA production by producing a roadmap and an action plan. And from that action plan, a few actions were implemented during our project. Additionally, because there were some changes in the project because of COVID, less workshops, less traveling, so money was left. And we used that to make a report on the use and the legacy of lindane and HCH. And then 1 extra site was added to the project, which was in Czech Republic. And then, that was the Vijgen site. And we developed a report on the strategy. We have an inventory, but what next? And we developed a strategy. And John will present that. Now, this is the history, and the history actually of the HCA production. It started with the first synthesizing by Faraday in 1852, and then in 1912 it was isolated by Teunis van der Linde. That's why it's lindane. Then in 933, it was used as and patented as an insecticide. Technically, HCA were large-scale production. Then in 1955, then HCA only the lindane was produced. And meanwhile, you see that the reduction of the extensive use here. This is the period, the dumping reduction. In 98 reduced, and then it was banned. So this is more or less the history of the lindane. And now we come to a very interesting slide, I think so. And that's in 1962, Rachel Carlson wrote a book, Silent Spring. And she was a scientist in the US, and she discovered that the extensive use of pesticides, including lindane, had a devastating effect on birth. And that's why the title is Silent Spring. The births were not there anymore. So from that time on, the awareness was raised. And here, 20 years later, Dutch standards on the Dutch scandal of the HCA. John was there very much involved. This man was being accused of cheating everything, but finally he was correct. And then this all leads to do the first remediation. And then the awareness started to grow. Here you have the Stockholm Convention, and now finally 2021, EU-wide strategy, a tool to remediate contaminated soil. And here we are. This year, European legislation is one of the short-term objectives of the European strategy. And if you see this time, now we're concerned about the contaminated site and the time frame when HCA was produced. It's more than 100 years. So this is really a lesson, I think, for the modern pesticides. If we use now, and we may be confronted after the problems after 100 years again. So I think this should be taken into account when new pesticides are being introduced on the market. This is really a lesson, I think. What we also did, because what we found out during the inventory, that there was far more use of the lindane and HCH. So what we did, we made a life cycle. And of course, production, deposits, landfills, storage facilities, and then treatments. And here, all these to the environment and human exposure. But what we find out that it was, of course, produced insecticides for forestry, crop production, animal husbandry, human health, and wood and plastics. And this was actually a category which we didn't identify during the first, let's say, stage of the project, which was the making the proposal. And it turned out that we had 7 categories, and the last one was others. And these others, it turned out to be a huge, let's say, bulk of sites which most likely have used lindane and therefore are potentially impacted. And just to mention one type, which is the wood preservation, for instance, for the sleepers on the railroad. They used creosote, for instance, to preserve the sleepers, but they add pesticides, lindane, to prevent let's say, degradation of the sleepers. Okay, I told you that we had 7 categories, and Guido will go a bit more details, but in 27 countries is around 300 sites, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So this inventory is not complete. And maybe there are sites where lindane was used, but the potential is very low, but I'm pretty sure that, for instance, on the wood preserving sites where they did this creosoting of sleepers, I've been surveying myself in the old days, and that was a mess. But we didn't look at lindane at that time. We only looked at creosote. So yes, it's a tip of the iceberg, so there are far more sites potentially impacted. Now, what I did here on this is, you have, of course, the sites, and it's here, factory, processing, waste, landfill, and so on. And then what is the potential legacy? I will not go to, use them all, but for instance here on the factory, pure waste, waste deposit, landfill, and storage facility. You can pure waste find on these site types. Now, the factory will probably have also affected floodplains. Examples will be presented later. I did that also for the other sides, crop husbandry, health, forestry, preservation of wood and plastics, and reuse and recycle. This was a very specific use. They tried to use lindane for warfare. But here again, floodplain, sediments, groundwater. This is a table to use when you come to such sites. Where should I look? That was task 1. Guido will go into more details on the results. Task 2, These are the sites listed where we produced a roadmap together with these beneficiaries. In all countries, we had local consultants assisting us. And what we did, we made a detailed roadmap and an action plan. And for instance, the hijack site, the problem was contaminated migration from a landfill mine with HCA waste from the Spolana site. So each of the 6 sites had more or less a different characteristics to be used as information for people who are going to remediate a site. So this is all available on the EU website, the results of our project. I come to the conclusion with a few remarks. Now, lesson learned, Lindaan as PCB, and I should not only say PCB, but also many other pesticides, is applied in a variety of uses, materials, and consumer products. The HCA in Europe inventory has an expiring date. I don't know what this date is, but it will expire. If you do not do anything and you just leave it in the bottom of your desk, it will expire. Then all the investment, this project in total amount of 2 million euros, is down the drain if it's not updated. And only when there is a legislation, enforcement, and a financial instrument, these sites will be managed in a sustainable, sound manner. And when there's no legislation and enforcement, the only driver for remediation will be site development. I mean, these are brownfields, maybe on a very, now cities are growing, and then maybe that's the only incentive. And that's happening currently. Knowledge sharing and teamwork enforce the professional's task with the HCA contaminated site. We did this project, I think a group of 30 people, very dedicated, all their own expertise, and I think with this group, we really also enforced others to handle this problem. Recommendations. My recommendation would be detail the country-specific inventory and keep it updated. Focus the inventory on production, formulation, storage, dumps, and landfill treatment, recycling sites, and sites where it was used and applied. So actually, the focus should be on all these potential contaminated sites. Investigate and remediate, especially when sites are redeveloped and or used for other more vulnerable purposes. These should be the sites being first addressed, where the site use changes in more vulnerable, housing, farming, or whatever. Now, develop a strategy and a financial instrument on EU, country, and regional level. John will, we did that more or less. John will come to that. And extend the cooperation between the professionals. I mean, I find it very nice to work together. The LindaNet is still there, and there are more, but I think that there should be somewhere a platform managed well with the budget to bring this legacy of more than 100 years old to an end. Thank you very much. Arak.
Next speaker is Katja Amsterdam. I think I pronounced it right because usually I don't have a good pronunciation. She will explain task number 1. She will explain the inventory in Germany as one of the countries with the most amount of sites, and we will see the inventory in this project. Katja is project manager at Seddon Smith, which is one of the companies that participate in this consortium.
Thank you. So, microphone is working. Thank you for the introduction, Javier, and welcome to the audience. I'm really happy to be here and to be able to present some results of our task 1 of our HCH in EU project. And I will talk about one part of our project, specifically the results of the inventory for Germany. So we looked into 27 EU countries, but I will now talk about the results that we gained for Germany. And I'd like to acknowledge our all the people who were working in this project in our consortium of Tau, CDM Smith, and Sarga. It was a great team. It was a pleasure to be part of it. And so we'll start off with the Task 1 EU-wide inventories. So the overall objectives of this inventory were to collect information about production sites, processing sites, waste deposits, storage sites, treatment centers, and in general sites where HCH and lindane were handled. And the objective for this was to know the magnitude of lindane and HCH problem in the EU member states, to promote a sustainable management of HCH and lindane contaminated sites, and also to achieve a higher priority on the political agenda for the various countries. Boudewijn just showed the general, the overview of the results of the whole inventory for all 27 EU countries. So in total, we identified 299 sites in the 27 countries, with the majority of production sites, processing sites, and also waste deposits. So that's the general overview. And all this information is gathered together in the geographic information model that Guido is going to talk about in the next talk. And in this database, we included information on the sites, descriptions of the sites, reference documents that are related to the sites where we gathered the information from, and also the summarizing country reports are included in this geoinformation model. This was delivered as one outcome of our product to the European Commission, and we're still waiting for the publication of this. In this inventory, in order to compile the inventory, we were gathering information like very basic ones on sites that are present in the different countries, the locations, what was done there, which actions were taken, how large was the volume of HCH and lindane handled there, was there waste deposited, are there known contaminations, did any remediation take place in the past already? And those were informations that we gathered. And for some of the sites, we also evaluated aerial photographs to get an idea of the historic development of the sites and where there were HCH heaps stored on site, for example. For the inventory of Germany, we used the following sources. A great source of information were the inventories on pesticide licenses that were available by the according authorities. So we had contact to the different authorities, to manufacturing industry, to operators of landfills and also treatment centers. We used scientific publications, contacts to academia, and especially a large part of our research was contacting the different administration bodies at the federal, state, regional, and local level. And with this, I'd like to already switch over to the challenges of this research. With the federal system in place in Germany, we have a lot of contact points, and because the responsibilities for contaminated sites are shared or different in the different states, so there were a lot of contacts to be established where we gathered information from. And still, we had a lack of data, and this was either because the data was restricted to in its usage, or people or organizations refused to cooperate in our project, and yeah, a lot of information is also stored in archives in printed form, either publicly available or in company archives, so that you couldn't reach it easily. And it was a huge amount of information though. And what you have to have in mind also for Germany is that we had been separated, and we have two former parts of the German state, the western part and the eastern part, and the development of the chemical industry was different in both parts. And this led to really numerous renamings of companies, repeated changes of the ownership and so on, and this everything is to be considered during such research. And this is also one of the tasks that goes into the fact that often we encountered non-specific address details. So for one company, that would be, for example, an administrative site, office site, but also a production or processing site. And sometimes you only get the address information for the administrative center, and then you couldn't identify where the actual handling of HCH and Lindane took place. And especially in the eastern part, there were changes of street names, so another hurdle to manage with. And I already mentioned the inventory of the pesticide licenses. It was really a rich source of information, but there was no distinction between formulators and suppliers or vendors, so you couldn't distinguish whether there was actually a pesticide produced or processed and HCH and Lindane were handled there, or whether it was just a vendor. Okay, now I'll get to the details of the inventory. We identified 98 individual sites all over Germany, with the magnitude representing processing site, production sites, waste deposits, and landfills. And you have to consider that production sites often had a waste dump just next to it or on site, and those single sites were then considered as a cluster, and we ended up with 69 sites considering those clusters as well. I'd like to give some examples, but I think I need to rush through it a little bit.
Still 10 minutes.
10, okay. So I'd like to start off with one of the biggest producers of HCH and Lindane in Western Germany, the infamous company Selamark, located in Hamburg-Moorfleet. It produced HCH from 1951 to 1984. And as you can see on the aerial photograph on the left side, on the right side, there are waste deposits in the greater vicinity to this production site. The production site is marked in red and the waste deposits in yellow. So we have 5 proven waste deposits in the larger area of Hamburg. In our report, we also included 2 suspected waste deposits, and we know that waste of this production facility was also transported to other waste deposits and landfills in other German states. We also noticed that that there is an indication for a network of processing companies also in Hamburg. So we found several additional processing sites located in Hamburg, which makes sense because it was such a large production site. And a common manner was in the earlier days that the waste was stored on site in order to recycle it to trichlorobenzene or trichlorophenol. However, this process led to the formation of dioxins, which are an additional contamination on the site. And they were not able to actually conduct this process in a sustainable manner. And finally, the production was closed down by the authorities in 1984. And this was when they started about thinking strategies for the remediation. The first attempts in the 90s failed because they tried to incinerate the waste that was on site, but because of the high chlorine content, they had corrosion of the whole incineration plant, and they needed to think about different approaches. And the current status is that the production site is secured with an underground concrete containment in place, and the groundwater around it is secured by a pump and treat facility. The other very big production site is in the former eastern part of Germany, on the industrial site Bitterfeld-Wolfen. It is a cluster of multiple waste dumps, production sites, and processing sites. Between the years 1967 and 82, they produced almost 73,000 tons of HCH. So it was a large production facility. And you can have a whole session just about this site. It's really complex, and there are much more contaminants in the ground, not just HCH and lindane, because it was such a big chemical plant. But what is also interesting, and what Boudewijn also mentioned before, there is a large contamination in the adjacent floodplain of the River Mulde, where the HCH waste was transported to, and now the responsible authorities are looking for solutions how to handle the HCH there in these natural preserve areas. So remediation has happened on the site, and it's ongoing. Another site in the former eastern part in Saxony is the Vijgen in Chemnitz. It's like area-wise, it's a rather small production site, but they produced up to 31,000 tons of HCH, so quite some output. And there were also other contaminants on the site. It was remediated, and it's now developed to an industrial site. There's another adjacent production site which belongs to the Vijgen Chemnitz in Moosdorf, and this was also remediated in the from 2012 to 2016. And how many minutes? Okay, so I think I need to rush through that. I just wanted to include that one site, or that company Desovac, because it was really famous, or became famous in Germany because there was a lawsuit going on. They were a big manufacturer of wood protection products, the so-called Syla Decor or Sylamon paints that were extensively used to paint wood also for indoor use in the 70s and 80s, until they realized that it has negative health effects. And then in the 90s, there was a lawsuit against the Desovac for selling those wood preservatives unless they knew that those substances are toxic to human health. So we were not able to identify the processing site for this company because there were multiple mergers and takeovers, and we couldn't identify the actual processing site. And cooperation with regard to this site was rather low. And last but not least, there's the Merck production site in Darmstadt in the state of Hesse. And they had two production sites, one in Darmstadt and one in Gansheim. And also here they were storing the waste material on site, and they're still in the course of remediating those remaining waste deposits on the sites and taking out the material stepwise. And both sites are secured hydraulically by pumping and taking out the groundwater. Okay, so some information about the gaps of the German inventory. HCH and lindane had been very popular. Both substances, so the substances had been used in so many different applications. Here are given some examples, and I'd like to redirect you to our report, The Use of Lindane, to get more information about this. So it is very likely that there are additional potential sites where larger volumes of HCH and lindane had been handled to produce all these different products. And we also got so these are, for example, wood preserving sites. But we also were in contact in the western part of Germany with cooperatives dealing with agricultural needs who were selling pesticides. And it was difficult to retain data from them because they haven't had a central database for the volumes of pesticides which were stored at the individual sites. And with this, I'd like to redirect you to our very comprehensive collection of information in our country report. It's available under this link that I just put on the slide here. And of course, you can download all the other reports of the 26 other countries down there. So the conclusions for the German inventory are there is potential for much more sites that we actually identified. And because a lot of more information was gathered that is shown in the GIM, in the geoinformation model, but not all the gathered data was suitable to be published because of different reasons that I mentioned already. So we do have strong evidence for further 11 sites, and we know about 23 sites where HCH and lindane handling is confirmed, but we couldn't identify the exact location, or we faced data use restrictions, so we couldn't publish the information. And out of the pesticide license inventory, we suspect that we weren't sure for 81 of these companies that are mentioned in there, whether they're real vendors or processors or just vendors, so it wasn't clear whether they could be used for this inventory. So this means for most identified sites, about 60%, there are still existing questions and uncertainties. So these uncertainties shall be followed up further in Germany. And what we also noticed is that although HCH and lindane were used so extensively, especially for pesticides, but also for other uses, specifically for pesticide manufacturing sites, we've seen that the focus was drawn onto heavy metals, and HCH hasn't been a common analytical target. So there could be potential for more contamination, but if a site was remediated because of the heavy metal contaminations, it's likely that the lindane was also taken out. And we also think that the federal system somehow hampers the exhaustive overview and aligned strategy for the remediation of the contaminated site. It's good that you have the local authorities taking care of the specific problem, but in the end, it wasn't really possible to get a whole overview from the federal state authorities in this case. So we would recommend this. And for Europe, we think that the project results are the necessary basis for follow-up steps of the in the EU countries. There are technical solutions for handling HCH and lindane contaminations available. And Boudewijn already mentioned that it's really important to connect the problem owners with each other so they can share information on treatment technology and how to handle these contaminations. And with this, I'd like to thank you for listening and take any questions you have.
I see there are no questions, so we can keep up and start with our next speaker. He's the project manager, and he will talk about the tool that was developed for the inventory of geographical information for the GIM, the Geographic Information Model, that was used to make the inventory in the different countries of the European Union. We use this model in order to be able to map the different sites, contaminated zones.
Guido.
Thank you, Javier. Yes, I'm
this will be one of the laziest presentations of the current forum. Not on purpose, but we explained the gym in a webinar. And so I had to tape the whole story at that point. And unfortunately, to use the gym, I need internet and fast internet, and that's not really available. So we will actually see the webinar video where it explains everything in the gym. But I do have some slides, so that's me. I'm a consultant, contaminated sites and hazardous waste with TAO for 17 years. Experience with pesticides and contaminated land. And TAO is, as has been mentioned by my colleagues here, one of the partners of the HCH in Europe project. So we developed a GIM tool, and why did we do that is because making an inventory of HCH contaminated sites in Europe, you gather a lot of data, and if you don't structure your data in a right way, you'll be lost in piles of paperwork and folders on your drive, and then it's on my drive, it's not on his drive, it's not on the CDM Smith drive, Saga cannot access it. So we developed a platform where we actually could work all together and where we could register the data. And another thing, what we did with this GIM tool is that we transferred it to the European Commission. I contacted them last week, and they said that they received it, they put it to practice internally, it's working, and now they have to go through the bureaucracy for the external publication of the data. So apparently it's gonna happen. I do wonder if the DG Environment would have handled the COVID epidemic, how fast that would have gone. We would probably be buying the mouthpieces at the moment. But okay, at least there is some progress, so I'm happy to hear that. Next slide. So the tool, as I said, we used it to identify sites. We added background data, and we constructed conceptual site models. And this is the video. Can you get the video running?
Welcome. My name is Guido van der Cotelet. I'm from TAO. I will present the geographical information model that we've used to register all the HCH sites within the European Union. This data will be made available through the European Commission at the end of the project in one form or another. What you can see here is a map of Europe, and the different colors indicate the presence of HCH sites in the various countries, where red is countries where HCH contaminated sites, HCH sites have been confirmed. Yellow are countries where there are suspect sites, but the actual presence of HCH or handling of HCH at these sites has not been confirmed yet. And green are countries where there are no HCH contaminated sites. And the green countries in Europe are Estonia, Cyprus, Malta, and Luxembourg. So congratulations. Now, an interesting feature that we have built into our system is the EU databases on groundwater quality and surface water quality. So there's EU-wide databases that have monitored HCH in groundwater and surface water, and this information is also included in our system. Now we can zoom in, for instance, to Spain, and we'll need to wait a bit. We can see in Spain that if we switch off the country list and we wait for it to load the monitoring points. In the meantime, I can briefly explain to you what the black points are. The black points are all the different sites that we have in Europe, and we've registered them and we've given them all a unique number. And the gray points are sites that are at this stage not confirmed. So they're suspect of HCH handling in the past, but there is no confirmed information. Now here you see the points. The red points are monitoring points of HCH in surface water. You can clearly see, for instance, downstream of the sites in northern Spain, in Aragon, in Quinosa site, there is presence of HCH in surface water. So it is nicely used to track down sites, and we might be able to do that with other sites as well. For instance, there is a location here where HCH has been detected in surface water, but we don't see a site as of yet. Now, if we go and zoom out and we'll look at a site in more detail, I can explain that what we have done for the individual sites. And we'll move for that to the site in Deventer, the Netherlands. So here we have a site which is registered as NLDE01. And that is a production site. Production site is a location where HCH, the base product, was made, and from there on there was either pesticides produced or the base product was sold to what we would call processing sites, and these are sites where HCH was mixed with other pesticides to produce a market-ready product. So here in Deventer, in the Netherlands, there is a site next to the city center, and this site, I can click on that here. You see that this is the information that is included in the database. So country code, site code, what type of site it is, what's the address of the site, a site history is included, what's the environmental setting, what is currently on the site, a consulting firm, and to be more specific, the headquarters of TAU is on top of this site, and the university. There's a site risk score, and we'll get back to that later.
Lazy bum, huh?
And there is an overview of the, level of control of this location. Now, at the bottom, and that's very interesting, is here you can see the information that has been used to classify this site, to detect the site. And for instance, I can click on the top one, which is a newspaper article about a fire that took place at this location. If you now go back to our site itself, there is an interesting feature that this site here in Deventer is actually connected to the main site on the Handelskade, and that's the point. And from there you can see the different site uses. So this location actually has a production site and a landfill site. The landfill site, we can zoom to it, is the Westfalenstraat landfill, which is present a little bit to the east of the main site. So essentially what has happened is that at this site HCH waste from the production was driven to the landfill and deposited here, and at the landfill site it has mixed with regular waste, creating a contaminated area. Now, another feature that we've constructed in our GIM is the use of a conceptual site model. So how we have done that, and I can show you that briefly, is that you can select source areas, receptors, and pathways. So, for instance, in the case of the Westfalenstraat landfill site, the source area is HCH contaminated soil. The pathway would be in the groundwater, and the receptor in this case would be the surrounding groundwater. And this is then given a risk score. So you can click on one of these points, and you will see the risk score that is associated with this location, and it will give you an overview. Of what the actual, let's say, danger of a site is, or what is the actual ecological, human health, and migration risk of a location. And for each site, we have added all the risk scores into a main database, where in the end you can see for the entire area and that is done in the main site, and that's the main Handelskade site. What is the total risk score? What is the main site risk? In this case, it's migration, and how we would classify the site. In this case, the site is classified as controlled. Both the Westfalenstraat landfill site and the main area in the city center of Deventer have been remediated. However, there is still an issue with ongoing spreading of residual contamination. So like that, for the main sites, you can simply see what's happening, what we predict is an issue, and how that is developed into the actual project. Is there anything else I can tell you about this? No, that's basically the main points. And so we've done that for all the sites in the European Union. As mentioned, there's quite a few sites that are still gray, so we're still looking at those. And hopefully by the end of this project, it's going to be clear for us where all the HCA sites are. And your input in this will be very much appreciated. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so thank you for your attention indeed. So that was how it looked like during our actual inventory itself. So in the end, as Katja already mentioned and Boudewijn as well, we identified 299 sites, and these are the confirmed sites. We could not publish unconfirmed sites. Yeah, it's part of it. I think it's to do with issues. The Commission was afraid of liability issues. If we don't have the hard data to prove a site is contaminated with HCH, we could not keep it into the site. And we could not leave all the data we have in the site, because some of the data is internal, some of it has been shared by us without the permission to officially publish it. But still, there is really a big quantity of data available. And this is actually the end status of how it looks now. I did understand from the Commission that what they have achieved themselves is exactly the same. So what you will hopefully in the next period be able to access from the Commission is the same database that we have been able to share with them. And there is just a lot of data available. It's really comprehensive. And I hope it will give insight to a lot of people, and hopefully we'll start the discussion on a number of these sites. I don't know, since we're in the Iberian Peninsula, if there's anybody from Portugal, I'm a little bit angry at Portugal. I did that one myself. As you can see, Portugal on the map is yellow, meaning that we have not confirmed any sites. Now in Portugal, we know that HCH products were actually marketed. We just don't know where they were produced and if they were produced in Portugal or simply imported, how long they've been marketed, what quantities. But the Portuguese authorities simply said, no, there's no problem. And they stonewalled us. And this is something that, you know, as somebody who wants to try and uncover the truth, I usually struggle to accept. So if anybody knows about the HCH sites in Portugal, just contact John or me or Boudewijn, and we'll try and sneak them into the viewer before the Commission actually publishes them. And we'll do that for free. And that was my presentation. Any questions?
I think there's one question.
Hello, I am Javier, member of Ecologists in Action, and I was surprised when I saw the map because there were few points where there is an inventory in Spain. In 2017, when there were 8 points in the map we could count up to 26. So we need to take into account that in Spain, there were 9 factories. Then there are 13 autonomous communities that have been impacted by this element, and therefore these points are very few, in my opinion. I don't know whether this is the case such as in Portugal, because the information is not being received. And on the other hand, the affected basins in our country are 12 affected basins, and one of these basins also have a direct relationship with Portugal. This is when it comes to waters. I was also surprised at the fact that in the Basque Country, there are many few points, or they do not even appear. However, there is a good inventory of soils where you can see these soils and landfills with linding. This is something that we know. I don't know whether you got this information, if you asked for this information or not, or whether the same is happening as in Portugal. We should have an authority coordinating all the autonomous communities in order to send this information. The Spanish inventory was made by us, and I will reply to you for the second or third time. I will tell you the same reply. Look, Javier, this is an inventory. We are changing the numbers to 150 plants. It is the same. Of course, the inventory needs to be updated. This is clear. We talked about a plant in Valencia, and we discussed with the autonomous community, and there was never such a plant in Valencia, never. But if you have this plant in an inventory and you have the information that there was linding, I have to tell you, this doesn't exist. This is not an industrial plant. This is just a residential area. No one has the knowledge of such an existence. There was no production in Valencia. We can keep trying. We talked to the autonomous community of Valencia, and they said to us, what are you telling us? It's the same with the case of Catalonia. Place, okay, has many things and also lending, but look, there is a plan of 130 million euros to have this contamination. The same happens in Navarre. There were several sites where there were remediation processes, and it is considered as decontaminated. And Javier, you know that many of the actions started at the same time as this project, and in many cases those were not landfills, but rather a truck that had dumped those wastes coming from Baracaldo and your area, but this was just a dump from a truck. Someone had reported this, and that was there for many years, but then this was removed according to legislation, and the area is officially clean. The same happens in Barcelona. We cannot keep talking about the linding plant when this plant was decontaminated in 1992. There was a favorable report from Catalonia, from Valencia, that confirmed this, because there was a residential area created. So look, yes, there was a plant, but this is a decontaminated area right now. And this also happens in the Basque Country. This information comes from the official authorities, from the autonomous communities. In the case of the Basque Country, since you are so interested, we talked to IOBE, and we have reproduced exactly the data, their catalog. We have reproduced this catalog, and in the case of this, we added a new site, which was the Vitoria's landfill. This was through a report for the Ebro River Basin Authority, the same with the other countries. So look, I cannot make this up.
I think that you touch, I mean, it's clear that that you have really a community who is involved. And these are, I would not set it away as details, but this clearly demonstrates that an inventory is not just a standalone thing, and that to use it in future, it should be updated. And then if additional information comes, and that was one of the questions I would like to ask Guido, would you allow a certain community to have this as an open source, because that's important. If you have information, you bring it up and it should be added to this gym. But yeah, should it be open source, or is it possible to be open source?
Well, thank you, Boudewijn. I think it's a good one. And of course, by the time the Commission will publish it, we should maybe see and push the Commission if it can be a living gym. Open source, you run the risk that everybody just puts things in, and but if it can be a living document, that could be beneficial, because yes, if you do find data at some point, I have an example. We do an inventory in Bosnia-Herzegovina of POPs. So we in inventory, and in 2015 they said there is no more PCB in Bosnia. So we said, okay, we're going to look again. We find 300 tons of PCB. Okay. Was the inventory wrong in 2015? No, they did it, they got the data. Now we have 300 tons, we're almost done. Then we get a letter, oh yeah, we also have 40 tons. Okay, we'll add that to the inventory. Our report is almost, finished at the printer. We get another letter, oh yeah, we forgot another 10 tons. Okay, do we add that? Okay, we'll add that, but at some point, the inventory, what we have published and sent to the Commission was based on the data and the information that we had gathered until that. And we had a look at everything in great detail. And also, we have been in contact with you throughout. And you gave us sites, we had a look at sites. In the end, we had to make a decision. Okay, we can publish that because we have enough data to say, okay, this site is contaminated with HCH, or there is just not enough data, and we are not in a position to pinpoint and show, we just name a number of sites that they are contaminated with HCH. That's not what the Commission can do. If there is just a doubt, these locations where there is a doubt are actually in the report, but not in the gym. And in the reports, they will be published, but there it's totally clear that these locations are suspect. And yeah, you can always go to the Commission and keep pushing, because I think that is always good. You keep pushing and keep bringing attention to the topic. And yeah, so I hope at least that our efforts have been worthwhile, because we have put a lot of effort in it across Europe. And that can always be more, and we can always need more. Of course, we ask the Commission, no, we should do this, we should do that. There's only that much you can do within a certain time frame and a certain budget.
Okay, thank you. I would like to end this discussion, and we can later on find time, but we already are more than a quarter behind schedule. So please go ahead. Javier.
Thank you. I would like to end up saying that in all the countries that we have worked, some of them have collaborated more with us, some less. For example, having in Croatia, they have 2 production sites, and they say they have no waste dams. Of course they have had them. But of course, I'm no one to go to the environmental ministry of Croatia and say, no, of course you have waste dams. I need to wait until the European Commission decides to go and to investigate and to see some places where there was some earthwork and they could tell waste dams were present in the past. So, okay. So let's talk about the tender. It was a moment where new solutions were being searched for the problems of the 6 sites that were chosen. And we decided to talk today about Galicia because it's entered in a later stage to the project. During this forum, you heard a lot about talking about political commitment to execute these projects. When the tender, when to enter the tender, we needed to have some signatures and also a specific invitation. We needed to have a letter with signatures from competent bodies. And these was a problem because, well, I'm not a technician, but I know the problem of lindane is persistent. It has been a problem for a long time, and politicians don't really like to start working on a problem that they know they're not going to be solving. For example, about this is the problem of baleen. It's going to be taking a long time. The politicians that are working now are not going to be seeing that. Maybe their daughters and sons. They do not like, for example, problems like this, and they're not very sexy, so to speak, they're not attractive. So in our inventory, we can see that lots of countries didn't want to give any information because they did not want to disclose that they had contaminated sites, because at the end of the day, they were revealing a health safety problem. In the case of Bracuña, a small consultancy asked for help because they have several big dumps in the country, but the most important of them is next to the capital in a very sensitive place. And they had an idea. They wanted to create a wall to the perimeter of the site. It was 14 meters high. And they had that idea and they want to reinforce it, to strengthen it. And of course, they wanted to present it to the politicians because it was a great investment. Of course, you cannot, you need to look out for your investments if you're going to invest 40 million euros in something. We have some colleagues that 20 years ago were implementing strategies, the strategies that we're implementing right now in Sardas, and we're succeeding. They didn't. But this is something that happens in such persisting processes such as this one. So we work doing consultancy work with some sites. We started with Oporriño, the Oporriño site. So for starters, we did a characterization of the 6 sites so we can study their context, their background to know what happened. Of course, we knew the case of Aragon, but we didn't know anything about Galicia. We needed to study pressure, temperature. We also had to research the actions that had been undertaken. And with this information, the idea was to create an action plan. In the case of Galicia, this plan was made with the collaboration of La Xunta de Galicia. And we gave them, we worked with them, with the government of Galicia, in order to give them advice based on our experience in Sarga. We included a survey of satisfaction of the administration bodies and authorities regarding this collaboration, this project. This is more important than it seems, because in this forum we've been talking about networking, about connecting authorities and sites. It's very, very important to create these networks to create a feeling of trust regarding remediation works. I'm not going to go into detail because I think you've already heard about these. I really, really need to learn about people from the Netherlands and just record a video and let it do all the work for me. So Porriño is 14-kilometer distance from Vigo. Vigo is an industrial city. As you know, Vigo, it's in Spain. It's located in Spain. northeast of the country. And it has 114 populated municipalities, because the problem of El Porriño is that it's surrounded by houses. Just houses that are disseminated in the area. It used to be all country houses who have become residential houses. So that's something we need to take in account. And one of the main problems on this site is the presence of the Louro River. That's where the first traces of contamination by lindane were found, because the Louro River goes through the two industrial areas where the two production sites were located. And it's really close, a few meters away from the ancient waste dump that was on one of the production sites. And of course, all the runoff waters have been affected. There's a lot of rain, usually in Galicia. And so these contaminants have been disseminated through the mountain as well. Here we can see the temperatures, the rate of rain. Let's remember this is an Atlantic zone, and this is what I was talking about, all the areas that are very, very close to the Louro, and that's located in the middle of the mountain. So in the 1940s, two companies were established. Both, they were from the UK, and in 1964, these two companies became one, and they started to produce lindane. We need to take in account they have been working with chemical processes from the 1940s. At first, they start producing agrochemical products, and in 1952, they extend the range of products they offer, and they start producing a little bit of lindane. But in 1964, more than 1,000 tons of lindane are produced. Let's talk about the discharge points. One of them is just in face of the industrial area that is facing the river, and the other is the other industrial area from the other side. We see some discharge points that were detected, and in some areas of the municipalities, we knew the stadium of football of the Club Porriño. There some contamination was detected, and the problem is that in Porriño, well, it's a quite special case. Usually, when we talk about these sites, we talk about big dumps or big industrial areas, but that's not the case. There used to be some waste dumps. Supposedly they were cleaned. Right now, that waste dump does not exist anymore, but of course, lots of citizens use the dump to build things, for pesticides. We don't really know the extent of this. And because, for example, we know this because some of the sampling we did, through that we discovered that some of the focus of contamination were really far away, or quite far away from the river. And we saw that in the houses, there was kind of like a path with a high concentration of lindane, and all the houses around it have been contaminated as well. And remediating this is going to cost us millions of euros. These, of course, these houses that you see on the pictures used to be country houses where farmers live, but now they're residential houses. Okay, I don't have a lot of time left. Let's talk about the security cell, where the security cell used to be. This is the old dump, and now it's become a lane for bicycles. And this is something that has to be fought from the Galician government. There's not a lot of information about how the waste dump was, how high was it, its distribution. For example, they don't know, for example, the walls that isolate the residues is made of with a granitic material or not, so they don't know if there may be any potential leaking in the future. And actually, one closed block has been people have been evacuated because of the contamination. Let's talk a little bit about the action plan that we created from Sarga with the Galician government. We had a great relationship throughout our collaboration, and actually we exchanged a lot of knowledge, and if we wanted to ask for advice, we did. So about the action plan, we decided to study the places where samples had been taken, and we worked with Miguel Ángel, a technician from Sarga, to determine the focuses where or the points where contaminants have been detected. And the problem that this site has is that you need to do the sampling in public spaces. And the thing is that most of the contamination may be in private spaces. And obviously where the sampling was done in public spaces, nothing came up because probably the contamination was in private places. The security cell did not have an environmental plan. And so we decided to study the security cell in order to propose some alternative classified by coast, as for example, re-isolating the cell or doing some earthwork, dismantling it. Also, we decided to research all the points next to the old production and processing points. We decided also to make a draft of strategy of data and information using GIS. And also we made a first hydrological proposal for the area. Because of our previous experience, we know that if the contamination becomes a political weapon, things can get bad really quickly. And we had a problem because the town hall of Oporriño and the government of Galicia were from different parties. And these made everything more difficult. So that's why it's so important as well to have a third party in order to work with these very sensitive things, and so not to transform them into political weapons. It's a way of working in a better way, and I think everyone should do this because I think it's working. It's working in Galicia as well. As we heard, we have been talking about long-term plans, 25-year plans, and if you're going to be working for that long, you have to, everything has to be really clear. Should I? Okay.
Okay, just quickly, I would like to start saying my name is Miguel Madrid, and I'm independent water quality and contaminated sites consultant. And since last May, I happen to be living just 30 kilometers away from Porriño in Galicia. And I'm a little bit surprised of not seeing more participation, more presentation from Galicia in this forum. I went through the action plan, and I'm not sure how much of that has been completed so far. And I'm also wondering how we can all be more influential in order to bring the authorities from Galicia to face this issue. Thanks.
We have representatives of the Galician government participating in this government, like, for example, the head of contaminated soils of the Galician government. And soon they're going to start decontaminating the path that I talked about. And yeah, sure, they're performing very important actions. Of course, the problem in Galicia, the problem in this site is that most of the lands are private, so it's difficult to work in them. For example, in here, we have a waste dump that was abandoned, and it was in a municipal area, so you can easily work around it and inside it, but it's not the same in Galicia. It's a very, very difficult problem to solve, because one of the suggestions that were made, well, because the problem is that, for example, if you're building a house and suddenly you detect that there's lindane, what most people do is no, just let's not talk about it. Just no, this has been our lifetime project. I want this house. I want to have a pool. And the government of Galicia, the only thing that can do is pay for the decontamination. But of course, it's a bad situation for the owner of the house, because in most cases, it's houses that have no license, and he has a problem. It's a problem, for example, when someone transforms like a country house into a residential house. And if you have a problem like this, if you end up detecting the lindane, at the end of the day, you're going to be having a big problem. And so knowing how much has this lindane been disseminated is even more difficult, especially taking into account the topography of Galicia. Okay, I'm going to leave. This should be enough. Thank you.
This is about the guidelines being published on the Internet of the Stockholm Convention. And as I told you, there are, as you've seen, there are many sites that should be surveyed, should be, let's say, investigated to see if the potential risks are real, are existing. And of course, these guidelines are not made for instance, the Dutch consultancy. They are not made for the German consultancy. They have all their own approaches. These guidelines are made for countries where they have not yet developed a complete set of guidelines and legislation in place for site assessment and site remediation. So what we did on a very basic scale, we divided the process of contaminated site management in 5 phases, and here they are listed. The preliminary site assessment, which gives you an initial conceptual site model, as Guido told you. Then you go into a bit more detail with the site assessment. You do that based on a gap analysis and a survey and analysis plan. When you know everything inside, you make a conceptual site model, and then you move to the next phase, which is phase number 3, it's a remediation assessment. There you select the best remedial technique, and then you make your approach. Then, of course, you have your phase 4, which is the remediation itself, the digging, the installation, the in situ biological remediation, whatever, and of course, monitoring and aftercare. I can tell you that I did a lot of surveys and a lot of remediations, but in most of the sites, you need monitoring and aftercare. You cannot move everything, and to sustain your results, your investment of your remediation, you need monitoring and aftercare. And this is all described in the guidelines. Now, the objective of the presentation is to make sure that you know that these guidelines are there. The objective of the guidelines is, of course, to protect human and environment for getting impacted. And this is the guideline itself. This is the link. They are still draft. I'm not yet finished. I should have finished already a month ago, but I'm on it. And then the draft will, by the way, I'm not doing this on my own. I do this with Lee Bell from IPEN. Lee Bell could not be here, but he knows that I'm presenting it. And together we will finish this in the coming months. Now, there are 9 modules, except for we have an executive summary, introduction, and then we have 9 models, and number 9 is a case study from Vietnam. And then number 1 is the background, number 2 is the site investigation, assessment and conceptual site model. Number 3 as a separate model is the risk assessment. It's a very important aspect in this whole process. And then the principles and approach of the contaminated site management and remediation. And here you see the different phases being adaptive to these models. And of course, then we have a separate model on remediation technology and techniques. And then the selection, the phase 3 is a separate model because it's a very important aspect. And then last but not least, the health and safety. And then there is a last model on legislation, policy, and inventory development. So that's how to get started. I mean, it's easy to present all the technical issues and technical approaches, but how to get started, how a country should get started. So this is not only made for European countries, but it's a global tool. The term conceptual site model is mentioned several times. But the tool is actually just the understanding of the site, and you make that digestible for decision makers and for communication. Now, this is you have different types of conceptual site model. This is an initial conceptual site model. You gather all the information as we did for all the sites, and you try to make a best guess of what is happening. This is a conceptual site model or improved conceptual site model or completed, but this is a conceptual site model where you think that you know and understand most of the site contamination situation, and you can proceed to the next phase. So you can only proceed to the next phase, the remediation itself, if you know exactly, but if you think you know everything of the site which is needed to make your remediation. Now, this is also an improved conceptual site model. This is an example in Poland, and I will not go into details, but this was a very long process of remediation. But this is how it looks like, the number of boreholes, your source. I forgot to tell you, a conceptual site model is only complete when you have a source receptor pathways, and receptors. That should be in the conceptual site model. Now, this is just an approach from a project I did together with Guido. It is an approach made for Georgia, I think. Okay, first we did satellite images, available information, make the conceptual site model, gap analysis, sampling analysis plan. Huh? Okay. Then we did a drone. I mean, you have very nice techniques now and collect a drone to make a digital train model. Then based on the drone pictures, we adapt our sampling analysis plan, the sampling in a cold chain to the lab, the GIS. All the data was filled in the GIS. And here is the map with the cross-section and the conceptual site model. But you need also, of course, reports and so on. This is more or less the whole process of the first two phases. This is a pictogram of the process of selecting. What you have here your toolbox of your remediation techniques, and then you have your site elements or your site components, and that can be strongly, moderately, or slightly contaminated soil or pure waste. And from your toolbox, you select what is most appropriate. And what you do is you make a maximum remediation option, this, the maximum removal of risks. And here you have the minimum. With the least input, you try to get an acceptable situation. And then you design in between. And based on a multi-criteria decision analysis and on your budget, you select the best option. And the best option is, of course, the lowest cost, the best environmental merits, and reducing as much as possible the risks. Now, remediation strategy, risk-based, phased implementation, and Guido also said a dynamic work plan. Be prepared for the unexpected. Yeah, monitoring and aftercare, of course, I said you maintain the fence, maintain restricted land use, maintain erosion control measures, maintain vegetation cover, and pump and treat. So this is the last phase, is also a very important phase. Now, this is a summary of actually, in a nutshell, what is in it, in this guidelines. So the phases, investigation, phase one, you do your initial conceptual signal, gap analysis, investigation, laboratory data, and I said 1, 2, it can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cycles of investigations. Please, you will not be able to do that in one cycle, especially these complicated sites. Then you move to the remediation, the selection, and in that phase also allow yourself to have budget to do some additional survey on site. Maybe you have selected a remediation technique and you don't know what, for instance, the grain size distribution is. You need that because you want to do soil washing. Now, then you have the remediation, and look, at every phase you update your conceptual site model. And with this updated conceptual site model, you go into your monitoring and your monitoring plan, and based on the monitoring data, you update again your conceptual site model to be sure that the information of the site is real, is there, that all the data is in the site and that you can communicate the current status of the site. This was in a nutshell the guidelines, and you can download it yourself and have a look at it. We still are in the draft phase, so if you really have things which should be added, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker doesn't need any presentation because we all know him worldwide. He's our great friend, Vijgen, who will present the EU-wide strategy to manage HCH contaminated sites.
Let's go. I think everything is very practical here. With the projects, we started to find out what we have in Europe, but also at the end, we try to make a strategy. How we can clean up all these sites, big sites, how are we going to deal with that? Let me see. So, you have seen how we talk about HCH in Lindane. Why do we need to act? What are the lessons learned? What did we learn in Europe to have a strategy? Because we have a lot of experience. We started in the 80s. We're 40 years further. The way forward. So let's see. Now, I think I don't have to repeat these things. You know, Lindane produced 8 to 12 tons. Enormous amounts, which we have. All the toxic properties here. This material should be removed. It's lying there already 70 years. So it's time that it's going to be finished. No. So, now, this is actually a very simple way why we have to do something. If you just have now a tank wagon with petrol, it's falling down and it's leaking, then you can try to clean it up directly. So the straight away, when you start with something, short term, you can clean it up, and it costs you not a lot of money. It's cheap. But the moment you start to move on, and you leave the stuff, and you wait, for example, the waste is lying there, it's leaching over a longer time, then of course, you come with whole other costs. So that means if you leave the stuff a longer time, then your cost will be much higher. So if you leave it, say, half a year, it costs you 10 times as much. And that's the story already, why you have to be fast and not wait forever. So this in the next phase, no, this is not good. No. If you're even further, and it's already deep in the ground, of course you have to excavate more, it's more diluted. So what's going to happen again here? It costs you again 10 times as much, and you're a couple of years further. So your problem by doing nothing, you just make yourself poor. It costs you just money by doing nothing. Nobody understands it. I mean, it doesn't cost any money. No, you're losing your money. So there you have the next phase. You come into the groundwater, and you have already lost so much money because now you sit with groundwater. You have to pump it up, plus all the mess which is diluting. So you just pay like hell, and then you talk about thousands. Just people don't realize, we sit on these lands, that they're just losing money. It's stupid, but it's very clear. Okay. So, people talk about climate change. Look in the sky is very important for everybody. But what if you turn it around? That's under the ground. Hello, where are we? Nobody wants to talk about this. There they know, here they don't know. What are we doing? This is the reality. Okay. Like this, we don't want to know, eh? The ostrich sits, puts the head on the ground and says, we don't want to know this. That's the way to do it. Wake up, people. So, now what we've did, we made a strategy to deal with this issue. And it's not complicated. Because what we do is, we try to collect what we've done. And we've done a lot, a huge experience in Europe. So look, if you just start from the bottom, at the site where we're living, just one site, the site from Galicia, you have a site and you have a site level. So you have to work all the steps we have now explained, Boudewijn explained them all. You have guidelines, he explained it also. And then what you should see is, the moment you have a site, but if you sit in City X or you sit in Zaragoza, then you can make a strategy for Zaragoza, because you're working on investment, a city plan, how you make new planning for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So then you can take this site, the HCH site, into this structure and give it a place. Because then you have a unit where there's investment, where there's money to develop things and to clean up. So it's the problem is just a part of a whole issue. Plus you have investments. And there is the opening to look at these issues, to look on the cities. For example, the Netherlands has developed, due to the fact they started early in the 80s doing soil remediation, that after 30, 40 years, they got stuck in the cities. Nothing was running anymore. Everybody was doing his own business, nobody coordinating, working together. And now they said, we have to accelerate. So the Dutch and the 20 cities in the Netherlands, we're going to give them a push. All the authorities working together, the industries, the communities, the water authorities, the the railways, the biggest pollution in the cities are right in the center with the railways, and they have to work together. So these concepts give a push that the city development plan take these kind of things in. It's not an isolated problem of the HCH anymore, it's part of a total issue. And that makes it much more attractive. So that's very important. Then you get to the regional level. Now, we have very interesting examples how the regions, for example, in Germany are dealing with these issues. They make Altlastensanierungsgesellschaften. They have companies which are publicly funded, the industry involved, the cities are involved, water authority, everybody is involved, and they join because, like North Rhine-Westphalia, big industrial area, they have only black areas, they want green areas, so everybody wants to build on some proper land again. So everybody wants new areas. And these old areas, you collect them in here. And you see that these Altlastengesellschaften, they have really started slowly, very slowly, like in North Rhine-Westphalia, black area. And you see over the years, you get more and more influence, and everybody gets his more areas, more conversions, and they really get things going on the right way by integrated all the parties together. And they're strong areas. So this is very important. Next to that, of course, you have other examples. Like, for example, the specific branch deals. You have the petrol stations. The petrol stations, you know, they have been cleaned up in the Netherlands, in Denmark, by the oil and the petrol penny, the cent. Just have the whole oil business together to remediate all these petrol stations. You pay it just by your running number. It's just every day you go and take petrol, every cent you put in, every time you pour for 25 euros, 25 cents is for the remediation of stuff. And that thing runs because there are millions of these tons. In the green energy, you have to change it anyway, but anyway. So the same thing is, for example, the dry cleaners. They made a deal that there is money involved, straight away a fee, and all these dry cleaners, they contribute to these things. So these kind of combinations gives you that you're able to find the different tools on certain scale to get these programs for these big sites organized. It's a very interesting tool. And then, of course, you look then at the legislation which now comes in place at European level. The EU also has to do something. They make now the soil legislation for overall, over the countries. So there they can make new funding, and they have to do it. They didn't do it. There was never a remediation fund in Europe. That's a mess, man. They have to do that. They need that. So there should be a big pressure there that in the combination of this new soil strategy, the EU water framework, the water issues, a big issue where you say the risk is they have to do so. Biodiversity issues, like Saxony-Anhalt, they have the Mulde River they want to clean up, and there is a point. It's a biodiversity area. So they have pressure to do it. So this combination of these EU strategies, you come further. Zero pollution here, towards zero pollution. Okay, let's go to the zero. But they have to combine it with real action, not only talking it and policy, but implement the policy. So in this, I think, is a very nice framework, but also for the regions. You cannot start remediation if you have not an organized structure. It's not coming from the sky. You need to organize yourself in the cities, in the region, how to deal with that. And you have to erect a structure, get the parties together and make a commitment. That's the political deal that every region has to do. And nobody has done it. So get going. Let me see if there are more. I don't think I put everything here. Then you have another one here. This is quite interesting. The Danish had 10 sites, huge sites. Nobody wanted to touch them. You got a program of monitoring, looking at this, 10,000 here, 100,000 here, but nobody wanted to touch these big cases. So the region said, we are sick and tired of it. Now we want to get it done. And they said, we want to establish a fund, a generational fund, that this generation is going to clean it up. And not the next generation. Not our children, they. And this fund has been established, and now they're going to clean up this set. 10 big sites. This is also something, every country can do it. Every country has 10 or 20 of the big sites where there's a real problem. You can focus on it and say, we want to get it out. That's a political decision, priority setting. So these are good things. So here you have actually ways actually to move things forward, which also help. Also back, take Aragon. Here we are in Aragon. Aragon was able to get everybody together, the opposition, green, blue, any color, together to make a deal that this Sabagnanico site, this big site, with $500 million or million to cost, will be cleaned up somehow. And the plan of 25 years was agreed upon by every party, not 4 years, and the next politician comes 4 years, another one, and just mess up the program. All together, long term, over the political importance. Everybody is involved. These are the deals, they're generation issues. These big sites are generation problems, and we have to deal with over a generation. He is also fighting for that. Macedonia, he is fighting for that. Now he's cleaning up. That is support not only for one cleanup, he just has done 15%. He needs 100%. And he needs commitment from Macedonia and other donors to get this whole stuff done. That takes a generation. He has gray hairs at the end, but he wants to do it. This is the way to do it. I think it's more. I think it's done everything. Yes. That's it. Thank you.
There's time now for questions.
Hello, I come from the Galician government and I would like to clarify something about the Oporriño. And I would like to say that some studies have been performed in the last years, integral studies. We had support from SARGA. Also, some documents about the decontamination of the pathway of Contrasto have been written, and these had been worked in the different committees within the town hall of Porriño in 2021. Representatives from the town hall and from Ecologistas en Acción were present there in this meeting, and during the meeting with our stakeholders from Lindanet, we realized that we're doing a lot of work, and I think it's a pity. That this information is not getting through to the citizenship, and I hope we can do it.
Yeah, I have a question for Katja, because I think, well, basically all European countries have signed legislation regarding environmental transparency, and what we hear from the HCH in Europe project is that more efforts are needed there as well. We need more environmental transparency. It's not possible that suspected sites remain in the drawer. We want them open.
So you're referring to the sites that I was mentioning with regard to data use restrictions. For example, I can give an example on that. We had sites in the former eastern part of Germany, and they were transferred to a new usage, and they have new owners, and that haven't had anything to do with the contamination. So their interests need to be preserved, so they're not like put on a public platform, because they cannot be accused for the contaminations that happened on the site. And this is one thing that you need to consider if you're talking about the publishing of the data, and that's what the authorities have to balance and think about what kind of data is going to be published or not. So we were able to actually look into the inventories, the databases that they had in that region, in the state, but we did not get the permission to publish the individual addresses. And so it was just, we summarized it up and put together the information, how many sites are present in the state, and how many are remediated, and on how many remediation actions are ongoing, or which or how many they still have to take care of, and that was permitted. So the authorities are aware of it, they take care of it, those sites, and but they would not allow to publish the individual address data because they are in new usages, partly.
Yes, I will try to be brief. You have been talking about 299 sites that have been affected, and the works are going to be ongoing for a long time. We are working a lot in working about thresholds regarding water. Water and soil are being regarded as elements that need to be remediated, but every time that we see amounts of soil during excavations or extracting water for wells, the particles get dispersed through the air. And in that case, I would say the thresholds, safety thresholds are not correct, are not correctly contemplated. The government used different models, and they work, for example, for 500 cubic micrograms. In Germany, for example, they have another measures. I have seen other actions. I don't have specific details, but in Basel, they work with 0.1, 0.3 cubic milligrams, and I am asking when will Europe contemplate these kinds of thresholds for remediation works? Because if I do some earthwork and I end up disseminating particles, I will end up affecting plots that are far away.
Yes, you're correct. It has no sense of carrying out a remediation and then have all the contaminants to another environmental compartment, and that should be, of course, prevented. But in such a remediation plan, if you do it correctly, you select also a technique and additional techniques to prevent emission to, as you said, by dust. That's one thing I want to address, because the remediation plan is not only the digging or the installation, but it's also the safety, this health and safety aspects on all components to be treated. And then we come, of course, to the legislation, and I'm aware that the legislation is not harmonized in Europe, and it's different. One of the short-term achievements of the soil strategy being published last year is that this year they will publish legislation on this. I'm not sure what they're going to publish, but this should also be an aspect of consideration. Maybe Guido wants to add something. No, but harmonization of the different reference framework is important. Air is maybe can be harmonized more easily. For soil, it's not. I mean, a soil in Spain is a different soil in the Netherlands. And although a lot of countries refer to the Dutch list, each country, each soil type should actually have its own reference framework.
I'm concerned about something, and it's something that no one has talked about during your presentation. It's the minimization of risks. And if there's any kind of follow-up when it comes to wildlife. In the case of animals, we have to take into account the risk of fires, forest fires, and in the case, we could implement measures, for example, prohibition or limitation of hunting or fishery. And in the works, in the forests, well, I think we have the example of the forest of Sabiñánigo. We know there a fire could be harmful, could be hazardous. And of course, we need also to take into account the risks for the population.
You're completely right. I was a bit too fast in my presentation because time issue, but the remediation assessment has to take all what you just elaborated on into account. Human health, risk for the environment, risk for fire, risk for accidents. This is all part of your remediation assessment. In my presentation, there was a small triangle, and it was the multi-criteria decision analysis. And in this multi-criteria decision analysis, you look at all aspects, including the aspects you are referring to. So thank you very much. I fully agree. And maybe I did not highlight it too much, but it's one of the most important factors of a remediation assessment, to look at all aspects, not only at the soil, not only at the groundwater, but at all the possible and potential risks. And that does not involve only environmental risk, but also human health risk and risk for fires and so on.
I'm a bit surprised about the little attention that is apparently paid to containment actions as compared to remediation or cleaning actions. I come from the field of radioactive waste disposal, and it's like the opposite in this field. I guess that in a way I can explain that to me because you didn't select the sites. So there are a lot of dispersion, sites dispersed or not selected. But I think that there may be a potential for containment in all those sites, even they have not been selected, on geology and on providing engineering barriers like we do in this other field. Could you comment on that?
Yes. In this toolkit is, of course, also containment, but this is really a point of discussion because containment, and especially the large amounts we have to contain then, including low and medium contaminated soil, and we talk about huge volumes, and your problem is not solved, it's everlasting. For instance, I can give you the example of the Netherlands. In the 80s, when we start, we had this containment option very often chosen, IBC, isolating, control, and manage. But after 30, 40 years, the things start leaking, and they have to finally get it done, because we are not talking about a stable situation. We talk about soil. I mean, we stand on soil, we use groundwater situation, things flooding. I've been surveying a site in Indonesia 1 or 2 months ago. Now a flood is happening. I can start over again. So if you have there the containment, yeah. So I'm not in favor of this containment option, but yes, it is one of the options in the toolbox, of course. But I'm looking at John. Also, John is not in favor of containment because you do not solve it. You solve it temporarily, and to contain, you have to contain it forever. I mean, then the next generation in this. So it's one of the worst options in my opinion.
I would like to address also another thing, specifically on the openness and discussions with each other. I think what is very important, now we have this HCH in EU project, we have the report standing on the website, we are still waiting that the GIS is also going to be published and open, but I think we need an open entry. We need that people can put their information in, at least make the information available, and get public to be part of this game. Because public has a lot of issues, but also let them talk, let them write, and then you can investigate, and you also can see the iterative process. Many times people have right, and they were not allowed to say it. And I think this history is 100 years old. So here I think we should open it up, and I think what we should do is follow the example. And you will hear that tomorrow on the PFAS session. The PFAS group is talking about a huge problem, it's coming up, it's as old as the HCH in the Dane problem. And tomorrow morning, on Thursday morning at 6 o'clock, this PFAS group gonna make a very big publication about the problem in Europe. And what they do is they put a whole database set up by the newspapers, the European newspapers, The Guardian, Le Monde, Süddeutsche, and other ones. They put it on the website so you can get in as a citizen and you can give your comments. We should get to an iterative process that we all working together in a solution. And this is the way forward, and that means also for HH in Lindane, the Commission has the stuff, so you have to put it open on the table and make it accessible for everybody. And if we exchange is that another thing, but everybody should have his vote on it. And then we have to learn to communicate like that. 2 million have been spent on this project, and then we're sitting 1 year already looking what we can do with it. We need a discussion with the population and move on together. That's the only way forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your attention. I think this was enough for the closure.